Well, hello, fellow supporters and friends of Zoe Ministries. My name is Alicia Lay, and I am a survivor advocate from the state of Michigan. Now, before moving here in recent history, I lived in Ohio and worked with an organization named Rahab, who's been in the anti-trafficking fight for over 18 years. Now, they do a plethora of things, but my job role was to oversee our safe housing. We had an adult house that's been operating for over 6 years now, and 2 years ago, we had the opportunity to partner with God and open a minor safe house that specialized in sex trafficking. Now, it was in that role where I first had the opportunity to meet Yolanda and Tammy and Zoe Ministries, and it's been such a fun adventure to see the way God has been with them all over this windy road to bring them to a place where they are today, beginning and getting ready and preparing to see the vision God has given come to fruition in opening their minor safe house.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. A special thank you to Pastor Anthony and Pod Church for granting us this opportunity to spread awareness with all of you. My name is Rebecca Paperno, and I am so happy to be here with you, kickstarting this event, Moving Forward, Hope in Action. As many of you know, January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Zoe Ministries of Delaware has organized this event to do just that, spread awareness. To all of you that are joining us today, that have taken the initiative to educate yourselves and understand what is happening today. There are many people in our community that are joining us, such as local law enforcement, pastors, community leaders, and survivors. Today you will receive an introduction into the vast world of sex trafficking. And today we will be discussing solutions to trafficking within our state. Zoe Ministries was started by Yolanda Slaybaugh, a phenomenal woman who is beyond inspirational. She is a registered nurse who was working in the labor and delivery unit and NICU, and she decided to follow her calling, to start a nonprofit organization that would provide safety, healing, and advocacy for young women impacted or potentially impacted by sex trafficking. After earning her undergraduate and graduate degrees, Yolanda attended the University of Maryland, where she received certification working with survivors of violence, trauma, and torture, and she's currently enrolled in the doctorate program for counseling and trauma. She has served as the executive director of Zoe Ministries since 2012, where she has spent most of her time promoting public awareness and developing the forefront to spread this awareness regarding the very real and very prevalent world of human and sex trafficking. Let me tell you that she and her team are amazing. They have done phenomenal things, and they're just getting started. Yolanda and her staff at Zoe have recently focused their efforts on public awareness, trauma-informed programming, and the goal to bring long-term housing and aftercare to female trafficking survivors in Delaware, ages 12 to 17. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you Yolanda Slaybaugh, who will lead us this day in moving forward.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you all for joining us. Good morning. I want to echo those sentiments and thank Pastor Anthony Trout and Pod Church for hosting this. And I also want to thank Stephanie Kearns, who is our admin for Zoe. She will not be up here on stage this morning because, as always, she is behind the scenes working her magic and keeping all of us on track for what we need to do. And she has put so much time and effort into this event and so many of our other events. And we just love and appreciate you, Steph, so thank you for all that you do. And we also want to thank Courtney Mills. You will also not see her up on stage today, but she's a very important part of Zoe Ministries. She is our volunteer coordinator, and along those same lines, we have a wonderful team of volunteers, some of whom are here today with us. And so we want to thank you for your dedication and your hard work as volunteers, because we wouldn't be where we are today without you. So before we get started, and I share a little bit about our mission and our history of Zoe, I'm going to invite Sharon Stevens, who's a very dear friend of mine, but also our education coordinator and spiritual director, and I'm going to ask her to pray over this before we start.
Let's go before the Master this morning. Good morning, Lord. It is a privilege to be here, God, where you have already paved the pathway. Lord, you are ahead of us. You were here when we arrived this morning. And Lord, you are ahead of us and before us and all around us in this work that you have deemed necessary for this state of Delaware. So, Father, we just thank you for this opportunity today to come before you, Lord, as your servants, Lord, to come before anyone who is watching, to provide information, Lord, to give education, and to, Lord, bring unity in this cause. So, Father, we just ask your blessing upon each speaker. Lord, we ask your blessing upon their lives and, Lord, their families. And we just thank you for the hearts that are represented here today in each and every video, the ones that have spoken. Lord, their hearts for people, their hearts for your people. And so, Father, we thank you, and we give this day to you, and let it be honoring and glorifying to you. In your name, amen.
Thank you. So our theme today is hope in action, moving forward. And I think probably most of you would agree that there has never been a time in our history where we as human beings need hope. And so as God would have it, in my devotional just a few days ago, when I was thinking about how to open and kick off this event, God provided for me exactly what I needed, and I just want to read a portion of this for you because this explains perfectly why we chose hope as our theme. You and I are on a constant quest for hope. We all want a reason to get up in the morning and motivation to continue. And I would say that's especially true in this work. But here's some things that we have to know about hope. God hardwired human beings for hope. We don't live by instincts. We all find our identity and meaning and purpose and inner sense of well-being in something. What you place your hope in will set the direction of your life. Hope always includes an expectation and an object. So I am hoping for something or someone that can deliver something that I need. Hope, in order to be hope, has to be able to fix what's broken. Hope that does not address your needs isn't very hopeful. You place your hope in your mechanic only if he has the ability to fix what's broken in your vehicle. And the last point, you always preach to yourself a gospel of some kind of hope. You're always reaching for hope and preaching to yourself the validity of what you reach for. So as we launch today, talking about human trafficking, particularly with minors, is a really heavy, dark topic. And we want to be able to instill hope along the way to not just bring an awareness of the insidious evil that has infiltrated our communities, our churches, our schools, on a local level, and a state level, and a national level. But we also want to bring hope that anchors our soul. And for us in Zoe Ministries, that's Jesus Christ. So I'm often asked, do we expect survivors to share our faith? No. Do we proselytize? No. The platform from which we jump is the truth that God loves people, and we love God. So we love people. And that's why we call ourselves a faith-based organization. So I'm going to start by showing you a slide from the Polaris hotline. Polaris hotline is a 1-800 number that we'll show you later on that puts a little red dot everywhere in the United States where there is either suspected or actual trafficking activity. This is the slide that I saw in 2012 when God called me to form a 501c3 called Zoe Ministries. At that time, there was no awareness. This was not a hot topic of conversation. We had no state legislation. We had no statewide training, no law enforcement training, no discussions. We were covered by the federal statute, the TVPA of 2000, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, but we had 0 arrests or prosecutions under that statute. So there was very little happening in the state of Delaware when God called me to this work. In the process of developing Zoe Ministries, He's given me promises along the way that I am watching Him fulfill. And all of you being here and attending means that you're part of the Zoe team. We are not asking God to bless what we're doing. We are putting our hand to what God is doing. This is His plan. This is His mission. And we're just a small part of it. And we have watched Him miraculously move time and time and time again. And we believe, as Becca said, that He's just getting started. So our mission in Zoe Ministries is to provide safety, healing, and advocacy in Delaware for those who are impacted or potentially impacted by sex trafficking. So how do we do that? How do we fulfill our mission? Survivor advocacy is one way. We are a voice for the voiceless. Often these young women and youth have not had a choice or a voice, and so we step in and we become that for them until they're able to find that on their own. We also fulfill our mission for advocacy through legislation and building relationship with legislators and helping pass statutes that are necessary to fight this crime. We also fulfill our mission for safety by bringing public awareness, events very much like this, so that we can help the public understand that this is happening in our backyards. This is happening with people in churches and children that go to school with your students. And we want you to not only know that it happens, because we can't fight what we're not aware of. But awareness isn't enough. We have to know what to do in order to fight this issue. We also bring presentations of awareness to church groups, and we'll talk more about that a little later. We have events like walks, so we can gather communities together and help create an environment of like-minded people who are willing to do their little part to bring awareness to this. We also host trail rides, spring and fall, to help represent the equine portion of our programming in Zoe. We bring safety as a mission to our Delaware schools by providing preventive education for students 6th to 12th grade. We also fulfill our mission for healing through our residential therapeutic program. And we have watched God move miraculously to bring, in the middle of COVID, a property with a beautiful horse farm, fully paid for, to open by the end of this year, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We refer to that program as Hannah's House. We also offer healing through clinical counseling with women who have been trafficked, also with youth, and we also offer healing through an equine mentorship program. You'll hear all about these programs throughout the morning. So how did it start? As I said, in 2012, God instructed me to start a 501c3. Had no idea what I was doing. I thought a trafficking victim was somebody that got hit by a car in traffic. I had no idea that this was happening in our country, and no idea, certainly, that it was happening in our state, because there was no discussion about it. So when God called me to this, we had a little discussion. And I said to the Lord, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I need you to provide somebody that can help walk me through this. So I started looking online, and through Abolition International, they offered an international grant and a domestic grant. And I'd never applied for a grant before. And so I called and I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I live in Delaware. I need somebody to call me back and walk me through this process of writing a grant. Because the grant would offer domestically, if you have a nonprofit, it would walk you through the steps of how to open a home. And I knew that's what God had called us to do. So within an hour or two, a guy by the name of Jeff called me back. And I had no idea who I was talking to at the time. But we spoke for about 2 hours, and at the end of the conversation, we prayed. And he said to me, I'm part of the committee that decides who gets these grants. And I believe the Lord just told me that you don't even have to write the grant. We're just going to give Zoe Ministries the grant, and I personally will be your mentor. At that time, I just knew him as Jeff. Later on, I found out it was Dr. Jeffrey Barrows, who is a national medical trainer and on the national scene as a professional expert on human trafficking. And that's who God sent to me to mentor me for the last 8 years in this work. And I'm so grateful. And you'll hear from Dr. Barrows later in a video. In 2013, 2014, and 2015, I took my PowerPoint and I went to different churches, different community organizations, and started spreading awareness and showing people in their communities, this is what trafficking looks like here in Seaford. This is what it looks like here in Dover. This is what it looks like here in Newcastle. And I was showing them on the screen how trafficking works. So I was spreading statewide community awareness. In the middle of that, in 2014, Delaware passed our first state legislation against trafficking. A few years later, the governor declared January as Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Part of the legislation that was formed in 2014 was Senate Bill 197, and a portion of that bill created a Human Trafficking Coordinating Council. I was asked by the governor's office to sit as an advocate on the Victim Services Committee. At that time, the cabinet secretary for Department of Health and Social Services was Rita Landgraf, shown in the picture. She asked me to co-chair that Victim Services Committee with her, and we did so until 2018. God has put me in places that I don't belong and has given me favor in places where I would not have had it otherwise. When God said to me that he was going to change the landscape in Delaware, and he was going to use Zoe to do it, and he was going to bring the partnerships, and he would put the people in our path, and all we needed to do was speak truth, and he would take care of the rest. I've watched him do it over and over and over again. We serve an amazing God. In 2016, Zoe hosted the first professional training conference at Dover Downs. Earlier that year, I had contacted a group of people from the state to see if they would be willing to help host and fund a trafficking conference for professionals. So I wanted to invite law enforcement, adult behavioral health, our children's department, and medical and nursing. There was no interest at all. And I heard God say, go ahead, Zoe Ministries needs to host this event. So I stepped out in faith, and I opened it up to 100 people for registration about a month before the conference. And I didn't know who would come. I didn't even know if I'd have 12 people there. But I knew what God told me to do. So I went to Dover Downs, signed a contract, wrote a check, and said we're going to open registration a month before the conference, which we did. Within an hour, 100 seats were filled. I opened it up to another 100, filled immediately. Opened it up to another 100, filled immediately. And it was all the people that I had gone to give awareness presentations that wanted a deeper dive. They wanted training. They wanted to know what to do in their service areas when they came across somebody who had been trafficked. So there was a hunger for it. But I was out of money. We had zero funding, and I was doing everything I did as a volunteer. And so I prayed, and I said, on the way home from Dover Downs in my car, and I said, God, this is yours. It's not mine. You told me to do this conference, so lead me in the next step. I had barely gotten done with that prayer, and my cell phone rang, and it was a gentleman by the name of Steve Himmelfarb, and I'd never talked to him before, and he introduced himself as somebody from the Matt Haley Trust Fund. And he said, Matt Haley was my best friend, and he died overseas on a mission trip. And he had such a heart for trafficking survivors. And I know that you're doing the work, and I really felt led to call you. What can I do to help you? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, let me tell you about this conference. And he said, well, how many people would you have to open it up to? I said, 650 would be our max. He said, well, how much would that take? And I said, it would be another $10,000. And Steve said, done. You'll have your check tomorrow. So I opened it up to 650 people. We filled it up, had about 150-ish people on the waiting list, and about 70 people that showed up in person, hoping to be able to get a seat that day. So when God moves, he moves. He never does anything halfway. And the picture that you're seeing is a room full of people back in 2016 that attended that conference. Later on that year in 2016, I gave my first TED Talk. You know, and doing a TED Talk is a little bit like having a baby. You forget the pain of it in between the births. So in 2016, I said, I'm never doing this again. It was way too nerve-wracking. And then in 2017, I did my second one. And God gave me a platform that I didn't ask for. And he continued to put me in places and give me favor that I did not earn. In 2018, we partnered with Salvation Army, and they began building their program and their infrastructure for adult survivors. In 2019, we hired Tammy Holland as our assistant director and our clinical therapist. We also began our EGALA program in collaboration with Courageous Hearts in Sussex County. 2019, there was additional legislation passed with Governor Carney. 2019, the kids department put out a report saying that they identified 35 kids in the state of Delaware through their system who had been trafficked. 2020, in the middle of COVID, God gave us the funding to bring on 4 additional staff, and he blessed us with an amazing property that we know as Hannah's house. And this is going to be a place that we serve 6 minors, female youth, ages 12 to 17, and we will offer them holistic, comprehensive wraparound services with education and groups and therapy and shelter and everything that they need in order to heal. Also in 2020, we kicked off our volunteer program. We kicked off our equine mentorship program that Sharon Stevens will talk about later on this morning. So why are these programs necessary? Why does a state like Delaware need programming? Why do we need Zoe Ministries? Because victimization occurs in every single one of our communities. Every place that I go and present, I show on the screen where trafficking is occurring within 5 to 10 miles of where we're sitting, and people generally are really shocked. Human trafficking is the second largest criminal enterprise in our country. It is a $32 billion, with a B, a year industry. It doesn't become that huge. It doesn't surpass weapons as a criminal industry if it does not infiltrate every county in our nation. The United States, not surprisingly, is the largest consumer of sex trafficking in the world. I'm going to show you really quickly just a few cases. This is an adult couple. These are all cases of minors who have been trafficked. They trafficked a 15-year-old girl at different Delaware motels. They posted ads on the internet offering her for commercial sex. Here's another case where 2 Delaware men pled guilty to sex trafficking a 15-year-old girl. Here's a case where a man brought in an adult male from Mexico and a 14-year-old girl from Mexico into Georgetown and had them living in a shack with no running water and no heat and no electricity behind his house. And this little girl was exploited for sex. The man was exploited for labor. And when this little girl came back home, when she was done making this perpetrator money, she was then sexually abused by the labor victim that she was housed with in that shack behind the home. This little girl had nowhere to go. When the law enforcement went out to the home, they weren't looking for her. They weren't looking for trafficking. They had a search warrant for something else, but they found her there and then placed her in foster care. And that's been our answer in this state. That's been the only thing that we've had. But in the same way that when you take an individual out of a horrible situation and just put them somewhere else, it doesn't change anything in their heart, in their soul. It's like stepping into a garage and saying, okay, now I'm a car. There is so much rehabilitation that has to take place. There's so much complex compound trauma and healing that takes so much time. And Delaware, for the first time, will now have a home for our youth in our state. So as we talk about hope and action, as we talk about how do we move forward now that we know that this is an issue, because if you know this is an issue and you choose to do nothing, your silence is then complicity and you're part of the problem rather than part of the solution. And everybody's got a part to play. So as we talk about moving forward and how do we take action, I just want to read to you parts of Psalm 10, which God gave to me in the very beginning of this work. And I want you to think about the fact that there's nothing new under the sun. There was trafficking in Bible times, and God saw it, and he knows it, and he catches every tear and hears every cry. And there is a God seed inside of every single survivor that he protects until he can cultivate it and get the soil to be in a fertile place, in a safe place where it can be watered and nurtured with his life and with his hope. So listen to these words. In his arrogance, the wicked man hunts down the weak, who are caught in the schemes he devises. His mouth is full of lies and threats, and trouble and evil are under his tongue. He lies in wait near the villages. From ambush, he murders the innocent. His eyes watch in secret for his victims. Like a lion in cover, he lies in wait. He lies in wait to catch the helpless. He catches the helpless and drags them off into his net. His victims are crushed. They collapse. They fall under his strength. He says to himself, God will never notice. No one will ever see. Arise, Lord. Lift up your hand, O God. Do not forget the helpless. God lifts up his hand to help the helpless through us. We are his body. We are his hands and feet to these survivors. But you, God, you see the trouble of the afflicted. You consider their grief and you take it into your hand. The victims commit themselves to you, and you are the helper of the fatherless. You, Lord, hear the desire of the afflicted. You encourage them and you listen to their cry. And this next verse is Zoe's heartbeat. This is why we do what we do. Defending the fatherless and the oppressed, so that mere earthly mortars will never again strike terror in their hearts. Thank you.
So school really let me down. So I was 15 and pregnant, and the guy who I was pregnant by, who was my boyfriend, was like the football star and the basketball star and everything of the school, and I was kind of looked at as like a distraction to what his life could become.
I was like the only black girl at that school. I had boys walk up to me and smack my books out of my hand and tell me to go back where I came from. Any chance I got to skip school, and I would do it.
I had been suspended a couple times, like 3 or 4 times. One day I just told my mom, I was like, I don't want to go to school anymore. I was like, I don't want to get in trouble for it, and you're going to get in trouble for it, so why don't you just take me out of school? So she just called and enrolled me out of school. I don't really think the school cared too much anyways, because I was probably one of the biggest problem childs.
The principal took me in the office and told me that I needed to leave school and not come back.
So I dropped out at 6th grade.
So the school principal kicked me out of school for being pregnant.
I can remember being in 3rd grade and being very promiscuous. And the teachers just said, oh, she's just fast. You know, she's just one of those little fast girls. She's hotsy. She's too fast for her own age. Why wasn't it recognized? Why didn't someone say, what's going on here?
Instead of sending my friend out with me with money to go get me something to eat because I was falling down drunk, I wish they'd have done something. I wish somebody would have done something then.
There was one teacher, Mr. Schofield, and he started seeing, I think, honestly, he started seeing patterns. I would walk in with nice attire on. Where are you coming from, Bobette? Oh, the mall. Well, where are you going, Bobette? To hang out. Really? It's just like he knew, and he made me feel guilty. You know? Just a little guilt because he was concerned. Mr. Schofield always talked to me. He always talked to me about the goodness in me the potential in me, what he's seen for my future. Like, he's seen something in me that I didn't see.
To me, the most important thing is letting people know that you care about them, that you see them, you take an interest in them. And I think a lot of times, adults, especially when dealing with kids, we just take those moments to make that connection for granted.
I was just speaking with my daughter the other day, and she said to me, we in our schools, we discuss drugs, drinking and driving, but Mom, why don't we talk about in the assembly sex trafficking? It's out there. Why are the schools not talking about it? But we can talk about drugs and alcohol. I said, I don't know. Maybe you should get on it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sharon Stevens, and I have the privilege of serving as the spiritual director and education coordinator at Zoe Ministries. And for the next several minutes, I will be briefly sharing with you about a few of our programs that we offer at Zoe Ministries. The first of these programs is an educational preventive curriculum, and it is called Power Over Predators. This is a curriculum that was created by the nonprofit Sold No More in Arizona. And our goal for this curriculum is to enter into every single school in Delaware, middle schools and high schools, to deliver education, because we absolutely believe that education is power. This particular curriculum is designed for 6th through 12th graders. And it is broken down into 3 60-minute presentations. And we will go through in the next few slides just exactly what those lessons are and the objectives of those lessons. And we'll just give you a sample slide of each one of those lessons. The first lesson and presentation is identifying predators. So kids cannot protect themselves, they cannot know who they're dealing with until they understand who the predators are. And so this first lesson deals with identifying predators, and the objectives for that are identifying the vulnerabilities in the youth so that they understand why exactly they're targeted, why they are vulnerable, and why someone would want to come after them. A second objective is understanding the predator's tactics, because they have certain ways that they move and that they pursue their youth. And the third is determining the steps to avoid or stop the abuse or exploitation. This next slide is just a sample slide, as I said, that is in the first lesson. And basically, this particular slide is simply speaking life into the youth that they present to. Second lesson and second presentation is the internet and the brain. So you will hear later from Tammy about the brain and the trauma and how it affects the brain. So this just slightly touches on the brain, how it's developed, especially as a teenager. What is it about that makes them vulnerable to addictions and to just a craving for love? So the objectives here are to identify internet traps used by predators, and I believe 88% of trafficking occurs through the internet. The second one is it recognizes dangers of pornography, sexting, and other online activities. And make no mistake, our society accepts and even celebrates often pornography, and it is the fuel behind sex trafficking, hands down. The third objective here is to determine the steps to be safe online. The next sample slide basically speaks to how predators hunt, and it says at any given time there are 50,000 sexual predators online. So our kids need to understand that no matter what app they are using, the predators are already there, already waiting for them. Our third objective here, our third lesson and presentation
focuses on overcoming suicide, bullying, and unhealthy relationships. And you'll see the objectives concerning warning signs of suicide, consequences of bullying and unhealthy relationships, and giving ways to develop healthy relationships. One of the successes that we've had with what we call POP, Power Over Predators, is that it has been embraced by our JHTIC, which is the Juvenile Human Trafficking Interagency Coordinating Council. It was endorsed by them, accepted by the Department of Education, and certainly COVID has hit and brought some frustration there in getting into the schools. So we are facing the challenge of still connecting with many schools and getting into the schools, but we will continue to push forward. And what we are doing right now to kind of skirt around the COVID issue as far as getting into schools is we are addressing Power Over Predators through community organizations, smaller groups that we can get before, because every single child that we get this information to is a child that can be saved, hopefully. Our second program that I want to bring to you today is our equine mentorship program that I have the privilege of overseeing. And it is modeled after the Crystal Peaks Youth Ranch in Oregon. And this particular program is for 12 to 17-year-olds. It can be females, it can be males. And what we will do is pair a male with a male session leader and a female with a female session leader. This program, I have been completely rewarded by being a part of this. And we have had several young ladies go through, and it's not just for someone who has been trafficked, which I think many people think. It is actually a preventive measure. So we do address human trafficking points in each session. There are 8 sessions. And we have one a week, and each session is 75 minutes long. And it's a one-on-one session. It is a session leader, it is a participant, and there is a horse involved. And the horse is strictly a tool. So as the child might be learning to groom the horse or even ride eventually, that is not the purpose of the program. The purpose is mentorship, to speak into the life of these young people who are in need of understanding that they are valuable, that they are important, that they are worthy, and that they are loved. And this is a faith-based curriculum. However, we will never force anyone to speak about, hear about God if that is not their choice. We ask the participants if that is something that they are open to. If they are, absolutely, we will continue with our scripture-based curriculum. If they are not, then we do not talk to them about God. We meet them where they are. And each week we come in with a different topic, which we will talk about in just a second. So these are topics that through the years with me working with youth, I understand that they are necessary topics to address with youth. And the first of those, in week 1, we come right into that session speaking about identity. Who are you? Who do you see yourself to be? And oftentimes I find that these kids don't even really give that much thought coming into. They are who people are telling them they are. And so we talk about that. Our trafficking prevention point in that first week is what is trafficking? So there's a lot of misconceptions about what trafficking is. Week 2, we go into value and worth and who determines your value. And the traffic prevention point you see is who are the traffickers and what is their motivation. The third one being freedom from others, that we do not have to be in bondage of what other people say about us. And a trafficking prevention point is how do the predators target you? There are 3 particular traps that they use. They befriend you, they manipulate you. So they're just things that they're common to every youth that they encounter online, traps that they use. And the more The more youth are aware of these traps, the more they are aware of how predators work, the more they can understand that they don't have to engage in that and they can avoid it. Week 4, you will see it's about forgiveness of yourself, of others, and maybe even of God. And then the trafficking prevention point focuses on the internet, the porn, apps, sextortion. And may I just say that these trafficking prevention points are pulled directly from Power Over Predators, which we just spoke about. Week 5, we talk about love. What does it actually look like? Not what society says it is, but what actually is love and what does it look like? And our trafficking point is, why do predators target you? What is it about teenagers, especially younger teenagers, that they are targeting? Week 6, fears and trust, and then talking about unhealthy relationships, the aspects of unhealthy relationships, because it is those aspects that then drive the youth to look for something to fill a void. And so when they're looking for something to fill a void, then they're looking on the internet for whoever will meet them in that place, and guaranteed the predators know exactly what to say, what to address, and how to meet that need in the moment, which is what draws the youth in. Week 7, we talk about safety and protection and then healthy relationships. So what does a healthy relationship look like? How does that work? I have never really experienced that. And then week 8, our final week, we talk about boundaries. How do you draw healthy boundaries to then enable healthy relationships? And then we speak about the red flags in warning signs for trafficking. So even if they think they aren't at risk for trafficking, I can always say, well, we need you on our team. We need you to understand these red flags because you have people in your school that are suffering, and we need you to help protect them as well. So as I said before, this particular program is not specifically for somebody that's been trafficked. I have had girls come in that are just in a dysfunctional relationship with their parents, or they're dealing with anxiety or depression, and it really does give them a sense of who I am matters, what I have to say matters, and empowering them to speak up for who they are. And one particular young lady that came to sessions had been trafficked, and we just simply meet them where they are for that day. So if they come in and they do not wish to do anything with a horse, that's okay. So we sit there. That particular day when this young lady came in, she started telling me her story, and we literally sat there and we just cried together. And we cried for about 15 minutes together, just about the heartache and how tired she is at age 15 of everything that she's gone through. And so it is a meeting of the need. It is showing these kids that we care for you. And that's how we preface the whole thing. I am here for you. I am here to hear you. I am here because I care about you. And this is your space. This is your space that you can say whatever it is you need to say. And it's safe. The third area where we offer services is through awareness, church presentations, and community organizations. So we would absolutely love to schedule a presentation with as many churches as possible. We do believe that the people of God need to come up in this movement and need to be a part of the solution here. And so if that is something that you are interested in, then I would encourage you to go to our website, okay, zoe-delaware.org, and find the category About, ABOUT, and then go to Book a Speaker. So if you go through those channels, then we will return your message, and we will hopefully be able to line something up and come to you with some information. So I thank you for letting me be here today, and if you have any questions, I am always available. Thank you.
aunts and uncles and my stepfather, they would leave periodically. They used to tell us that they went to the Bahamas, right? But that actually meant they went to jail. Even my mom went to the Bahamas. It seemed like my family had been in the system forever, right? So, oh, you're this person's daughter. So it wasn't like they didn't know who I was. If the cop says anything nice to you, nice, that means he's hitting on you. He's not being nice. If he looks at your buttocks, if he comments on why your shorts are so short, I guess the worst one, yeah, he raped me.
There was one officer, he pulled his fist slightly back, and it was dark, it was late, and nobody else was there. And I just said, go ahead and hit me. Go ahead. I know it may seem like I'm out here and nobody cares about me, but I have a father, even though it may look like nobody cares about me. I have family. My first hearing, the judge asked me, and this was crazy, she asked me, tell me a little bit about myself. I told her kind of like in a really fast way about the rape when I was 4, about the molestation, about my mom, and then I told her about the prostitution, how that, you know, the trafficking, how that came into my life and how that's been my life. And that I'm just tired, and she was like, you got it. I hope you get help. And she was like, I wish you the best of luck, Roxanne. I felt so respected that she did that.
We're not looking for the John Wayne, you know, go in there, kick ass, take names type person. You have to be able to talk to people, to build trust, to get them to trust you. I mean, they can't talk to their parents, they can't talk to their friends. So who truly can they talk to about what they're going through and what their experience is? And it may be us, you know, that provides that first opportunity.
There's one particular cop that is from my neighborhood. He knew my family, he knew where I grew up, he knew that, you know, there was some good in me, there was something about me, but he would pick me up. Officer Hunt would take me to jail just to get me off the street.
After I had 2 failed suicide attempts and really had absolutely no will to live, I really honestly wanted to die. I had an encounter with a law enforcement officer. And he looked at me and he said, what are you doing out here? Do you know that I can help you? And that was honestly the first person who ever came to me with empathy, that had offered any type of support, that didn't see me as that throwaway person, that saw me as a human being, that made me feel like I wasn't invisible. And that was the breaking point.
The thing I would want them to say would definitely be, are you eating? Did you eat today? Do you have a place to wash up? Have you slept? And do you feel in danger?
Hello, my name is Mark Hoagate. I am a detective with the Delaware State Police. Today I'm going to give a brief presentation on a law enforcement perspective with human trafficking. As a background to myself, I have 17 years law enforcement experience. I was a Wilmington police officer for 2 years, last 15 years with the Delaware State Police. I am currently assigned to the FBI Violent Crimes Task Force in Wilmington. As a broad stroke overview of some of the topics I'm going to cover is what information can you gather from victims to assist law enforcement, challenges in handling trafficking cases, and alternative approaches to these investigations. So what information can you try to obtain to assist me or persons like me with these investigations? First thing you want to ask is, does the victim want help? So you come in contact with whatever job you currently work at and you believe the victim is being trafficked. Do they want help? Because if they don't want help, that can also pose some problems. One, if they don't want help and you call law enforcement and someone in uniform or detective shows up, the victim can be put in a serious situation of receiving harm from the trafficker. They didn't want us there. Now that we're there and the trafficker sees us there, whether they gave us information that's helpful or not, the trafficker is going to believe that they possibly did and harm the victim. To phone numbers. So just by getting the phone number of the victim, we can see who they talk to, possibly identify who the trafficker is, subscribe for information. There's programs out there such as Spotlight. Spotlight was a program that was funded or helped to be funded by Ashton Kutcher. I think I pronounced his name right. But the program, basically we can, by victims' faces, phone numbers, ads, accounts, we're able to link them and it'll show where they're posting ads, accounts that they've used, and we can use that information to determine their location if they're missing, all kinds of stuff. So all that just from obtaining their phone number. The name of the trafficker, nicknames. Most of the time, traffickers go by nicknames, but those nicknames are known by law enforcement, or maybe there's an incident where where some law enforcement officer handled something and they're familiar with that person. So just getting a nickname. So like I said, maybe they don't want to talk to law enforcement, but you can just ask them in a private setting away from any trafficker or anyone else in earshot these simple questions, and at a later time contact law enforcement and forward it to us. Where are they from? So unfortunately, especially juveniles, in my experience, they run away from other states, and when they come to, or they're either run away from other states or they're lured from other states and are being trafficked in other locations. So it's good to know where they're from, so maybe we can see if there's a missing persons report or try to track to where they came from to find family members. What sites do they use to post their ads? There's been numerous sites shut down, but every time they shut one down, there's a couple more that crop up. We're constantly being told by females of all the new sites that pop up, so it's good to know what site they're on because there's so many of them. Where are they staying? Traffickers like to constantly move their females around, or males, to, number one, elude law enforcement. So it's good to know where they're staying, so maybe we can post up and do surveillance, follow up with them, send social services out there, stuff like that. Challenges. I started with chemical, mental, physical, and emotional bond. So I like to use the example, most of us know people or a friend that's been in a bad relationship and we can't understand, or even a family member or someone in your life that's in a bad relationship, and we can't understand why they're not leaving that individual. And maybe it's because they have a emotional, maybe it's a financial, maybe it's a physical, they're scared to leave. Well, this is kind of no different than a trafficking victim, but also add in the chemical. So unfortunately, with some of the common things that seems to happen is that these traffickers will get their victims addicted to a narcotic, and they become the supplier of the narcotic. Maybe they are already addicted to let's just say heroin or cocaine, and the trafficker becomes their one-stop shop for lodging, food, and now the drug of choice. So not only are they providing them with the substance they're addicted to, they've also been able to manipulate them mentally, or cause harm to them physically. So all these factors, they could be chemically addicted to something where they don't want to leave. Two, they have them mentally thinking, or they're playing the mental game with them. Or three, they're imposing physical harm on them and worrying about them leaving. Also, because there's also an emotional bond. These females develop a relationship with their traffickers. No matter what situations they put them in with the abuse, they still are emotionally connected to these guys. So as a law enforcement officer, many of the experiences that these victims have is most of the time negative. So as a person coming into this investigation with this female, I have to overcome first the stereotype that I'm not there to arrest them, I'm there to help them. And then I have to overcome all of those barriers, the chemical, the mental, the physical, and the emotional bond that they have with this trafficker, and let them know that we as law enforcement are there to help. Another challenge that we have is a low prosecution rate. I tried to do research on this, and I've only found one case in Delaware that's been prosecuted as a human trafficking case. Other than that, there's been nothing. The next challenge is caseload. I'm one of 2 people in Newcastle County that are not assigned but investigate human trafficking incidents. So that is in addition to the other caseloads I have with violent crime and gang drug enterprises. So with all that other stuff going on, and like I said, I'm only one of 2, and with the amount of complaints coming in, there's a huge caseload with not a lot of people to handle it. The victims. So someone told me the example before at training I went to that when you have a drug investigation and you obtain a large amount of drugs, you get the drugs or the guns or whatever evidence you have, physical evidence, and you put it into a safe. Once you need it for trial, you go to the safe, you get the evidence out, you present it at trial along with everything else. In a trafficking case, my evidence are those victims. So from the time that I make contact with them, that I lock up the or charge the trafficker, we're awaiting trial, I have to keep track of the victims to keep them out of trouble, to get them any social service help that they need, and to let them know that they are doing the right thing by assisting us by prosecuting their trafficker. So the guy that they have a bond with, I have to keep them convinced, which is very difficult, that they are doing the best thing in their interest by getting this guy locked up. And that proves to be extremely difficult. Alternative approaches. Prostitution operations. So as the way policing generally works is most of the time citizens or business owners make a complaint. So citizens in a neighborhood or businesses can say, hey, there's a lot of females that are walking up and down in front of my business and they look like they're prostitutes or or males are picking them up. And as a tax-paying citizen, we want it dealt with. Those complaints go to the governor's office and they get kicked back down to the agencies. How we would enforce that is we would go out and do undercover stings, arrest the prostitutes, and then await trial. Well, all we were doing is issuing a paid fine to a female who was making a living doing what we're arresting her for. So we weren't really offering her any social service help. We weren't figuring out if she was being charged. We knew nothing about anything, just the fact that she would just solicit an undercover male, and here's a new fine. The other investigations we do is reverse stings, where we're either we set ads up on these websites, we'd post as a female, and we would have these males come to the apartments or to a hotel room or wherever, and then we lock them up and we kick them loose. We were never finding out if the guy had a history of trafficking through any databases. I mean, we would run them to see if they were wanted, but we would never question why they were there or anything like that, or possibly flag them if they were in state, out of state, anything like that. If they had other females in the car, when they showed up, we gave them a summons and we kicked them loose. So having that in mind, we determined that there's got to be a better way, because it didn't seem to be making an impact in the community or helping anybody. So with the prostitution ops, instead of just arresting all females involved, we bring a social worker with us. I'll make a date. I'll pick the girl up off one of these websites, and as soon as we get her in the car, I'll have someone in the back seat, and we'll go to a meet location. We'll explain to the girl, like, look, we're not here to arrest you, okay? The social worker will be there, and we'll ask if she's in need of any detox, any programs, anything she needs that can help her get out of the situation that she's in. We're also, now there's a ton of ads and there's a ton of females, believe it or not, that are doing this. So right now, with the limited amount of time we have, we primarily focus on ads where the girls look like they're juveniles. And we've had success. We've had a lot of runaways where we've made the dates and the girls are like 14, 15, 13 years old. And we're able to assist them now. Found, located, and attempted to return to the parents or return to a guardian. They've run away again, so that's part of some of the challenges. So we go through the work of getting them help. I mean, go through the process of getting them out of the situation, but as soon as we get them out of the situation, they flee right back into it, and we're back to trying to locate them again. Reverse stings. Like I said before, we were just locking up the males. Now we see if we try to run them through other out-of-state agencies to see if they've been involved in any possible trafficking incidents and stuff like that. Massage parlors, we would, with massage parlors, before seeing anything community complaints, we would investigate it. Now we're trying a different approach where we're not focused on prosecuting the females working there. We're trying to go after the people who own the business, both financially and through civil litigation. It's worked in other states. We're about to try it with several in Delaware. So I don't want to advise where, but it's going to be a different approach. I hope it seems to be successful. Everyone involved seems to be excited about trying it. So maybe the next time you see me in one of these presentations, I can give you an update. But right now, it's never been attempted before in Delaware. Usually at this time, I usually ask questions. Thank you for your time. I know I was kind of all over the place. I apologize. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Wendy Elliott Mears. I'm a master educator in the state of Delaware and have been an advocate for children and their families for over 20 years. I'm a dedicated servant to my Lord, husband, children, family, and the extended family of athletes that I coach. I'm also a child sexual abuse survivor of a Delaware state licensed daycare. It wasn't until 2019, 3 decades later, that my trauma surfaced. A student in my very own classroom was the trigger, and something I could not escape. She was the great-granddaughter of my daycare provider and resembled her in many ways. I do believe this trigger was exposed by my higher power and was indeed no accident. I'm not here to tell you the horrors that I have survived. I'm here to merely tell my story. The higher institutions that could have protected me did not, and unfortunately still choose not to today. I was close to 4 years old when my sexual abuse occurred. My family was typical. We were involved in our community. Our home was loving and caring, and we were not of poverty. My parents sent us to a daycare that was in business for 30 years. It was well known throughout the community and trusted by many. Unraveling this horrific happening has been a re-traumatizing journey. However, I'm beginning to understand my story has powerful value. It opens up a pathway to developing skills to manage debilitating emotional triggers that I didn't understand. Working through my trauma has enabled me to connect to other victims. The hidden sexual abuse has taken its toll on each of us. I feel blessed to be able to sit before you today and share my story because many others are not able to do so. Unfortunately, their trauma led them to drug overdoses and even suicide. I have watched my own sister, also raped at the same daycare, battle her demons with the use of drugs. Fortunately, she is in recovery and now knows how much of a traumatic impact this perpetrator played in laying the blueprint for our lives. We are now in our healing and recovery together, coping with our triggers. I thank God that the truth has finally been revealed, thus allowing her to finally understand that she was never the problem. It was her abuse that trapped her both mentally and emotionally. I too suffered psychologically. Traumatic amnesia caused me to have PTSD. My flashbacks and memories were psychologically repressed until last year. My family and many others had no idea that the abuse was occurring due to the fact that our state institutions did not publicly report the abuse. This could have protected so many children that face the same abuse as my sister and I. My research has informed me that it is still common today. Some things I uncovered were that reports are not filed until after the investigation, if they choose to report at all. Our perpetrator was Noel Pross and set free for insufficient evidence. Eventually, the daycare did close on its own, but the state not only failed the victims, but also the perpetrator. Now I'm using my voice and my story as a legislative advocate for all children and any victim of rape. Trauma is real, and as a state, we need to become more trauma-informed. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are sexually assaulted by the time they are 18. This will only continue to rise without action. The family institution is the largest and most hidden. I am hoping that we can bring forth laws that 1, give victims the opportunity to come forward at any time in their lives. 2, give the law enforcement the chance to provide and prove a perpetrator's guilt through due process. The goal is to get these unsafe criminals off the street and rehabilitate. The state failed me and many others, and we continue to fail generations of our children. I witness and see this every day in the classroom. We are not doing enough. Our systems need to be rebuilt. These children grow up and are more vulnerable and susceptible to the same abuse, and trafficking awaits. If you were to do your research as I have, you will find Delaware has one of the biggest pedophilia groups right now. And our detours to stopping the violence are going to be our institutions. We need to be a state that leads and raises the bar so that other states follow. We need to collaborate and act now. My legacy is going to be for our most precious and most innocent. Just do the right thing. No limit of years. should bar a rape victim of their trauma. I have lived 35 years with this bottled up shame and never told. I now choose to be brave and speak truth because the truth matters. I choose to be the brave voice for those that cannot find their voice yet. Let's be one of the first to start protecting our most innocent and give them justice.
I am here to talk today about the availability of civil proceedings to human trafficking survivors. Because this is a short video, I am going to hit the high points, but I am happy to answer any more specific questions you may have after the presentation. Although the first thing we think of when talking about human trafficking is putting the offender in jail, a survivor is not limited to pursuing their claims in one justice system. Survivors have the right to pursue both criminal and civil claims. Each system provides a different remedy. As you already know, the focus of the criminal system is to punish. The civil system, by contrast, focuses upon restitution in the form of financial compensation for the survivor. Because each system provides different remedies, the burdens of proof are different. In criminal proceedings, the case has to be proven beyond all reasonable doubt. There, where a person's freedom is at stake, the highest burden of proof is required. After a finding of guilt, the judge's main priority is to sentence the abuser. In the civil system, the case has to be proven by what's called a preponderance of the evidence. There, the jury has to be convinced that, more likely than not, the survivor has proven their claims. Stated a different way, the jury has to be 50.1% convinced that the plaintiff proved their claims. Because the requirements for proof are not the same in both systems, a finding of criminal guilt is not necessary for the survivor to pursue a civil claim. So, who can a survivor seek a remedy from? Not just the perpetrator, but the survivor may also recover from the negligent and grossly negligent people, institutions, businesses, other third-party entities that enabled the perpetrator and allowed the crimes to occur. Under federal law, the survivor may also seek a recovery from anyone that knowingly benefits financially or by receiving anything of value from participation in the venture, which the person knew or should have known was engaged in human trafficking. In a successful case, a survivor may be awarded the cost of medical bills and mental health treatment, lost wages, pain and suffering, and in some cases, punitive damages or an award to financially punish the offenders. If I had to identify 3 key takeaways from today's conversation, it is these. Civil lawsuits are a remedy available to citizens and non-citizens alike. This is especially important to know in cases of human trafficking. In fact, there are avenues available for non-citizen human trafficking survivors to lawfully remain in the United States and also receive permission to work. Second, the law protects the survivor by allowing them to file their claim anonymously. They are identified on the public docket only as a generic Jane or John Doe. It is important to note, as a third point, that there are options for filing claims under both state and federal law, but there are also time limitations for doing so. The time for filing varies based upon the age of the survivor at the time of the events at issue, the type of claim being filed, and whether it is filed under federal or state law. Consulting an attorney does not obligate the survivor to pursue a civil claim. As with any attorney consult, all consultations are confidential. We are here to answer questions and to provide guidance so that survivors can gain knowledge, make informed decisions, and gain hope for the future.
Hi, thanks very much for inviting me to join Zoe Ministries' observance of Human Trafficking Awareness Month. My name is Mary McDonough, and I work as a judicial officer in the Court of Common Pleas. It's a misdemeanor court here in the state of Delaware. Now, we served an adult population, but let me share with you a story about a juvenile who Zoe Ministries helped. As you know, the juvenile survivors, victims and survivors of trafficking are really the primary focus of Zoe Ministries' mission. Well, one time, my brother reached out to me because he was very upset about a young woman in the juvenile criminal justice system where he worked, who had been detained in a juvenile detention facility. He was upset because she was the victim of crime, a serious crime, human trafficking. And this young woman, pregnant, with nowhere to go, was put in this juvenile detention facility on a material witness warrant, apparently for fear that she might run. And there had to be a better way. So I referred my brother to Yolanda Schlebach, and within a very short time, they had worked out a so much better plan, which resulted in the release of this teenager from juvenile detention, and with a move to a residential program for pregnant women. It happened to be in Wilmington, the only program in the state. But it was not specifically for trafficking victims, so Yolanda knew she needed more, and Yolanda recruited then a volunteer, Sharon, who I understand is now on the staff at Zoe Ministry, who was wonderful, a wonderful support to this traumatized teenager. Sharon would make that 4-hour round trip almost every week to visit this young woman. And in between, called her, texted her, emailed, provided her just tremendous support, really like a surrogate family member. It was my sense she was like a surrogate mom to this young woman who was about to become a mom herself. It was really an inspiring example of how Zoe Ministry and its volunteers and staff respond with generous hearts and tremendous speed to meet the needs of vulnerable folks among us. Housing, of course, is a tremendous need of these vulnerable folks, be they juveniles or adults. And I am thrilled that Zoe Ministries is going to be the pioneer for opening the first residential aftercare program for juvenile female survivors of trafficking. I commend you for this, which has been the dream of Zoe Ministries from the beginning. And to see it coming to fruition is just so exciting. I am privileged to know Yolanda Schlebach and Zoe Ministries folks and to work with them. It has been a privilege in the past to work with them. I look forward to doing so in the future. And to sum it up, my sense is they truly live the value that we are our sisters and brothers keepers. So I wish you the best, and thank you again for letting me join you today. Take care, and I hope you all stay very healthy at this challenging time.
Hello, I'm Nicole Poore, State Senator for the 12th District. As we come together this month to bring awareness to human trafficking, we are reminded of the work that still needs to be done to free victims of human trafficking and prevent future cases. While January 11th was Human Trafficking Awareness Day, this fight, it's year-round. I am proud of the progress that we have made. In 2019, I was proud to work with Representative Kim Williams, along with my other colleagues, to pass 2 bills that protect human trafficking victims. All Delawareans have a role to play in stopping this horrible crime before it even occurs. We can raise awareness by sharing resources available in our communities. It is vitally important for all Delawareans to stay informed, get the facts, and know the signs, because it could save someone's life. I will continue to be an advocate to end human trafficking in this state.
Perfect for a teenager. I was a cheerleader in high school, and I loved my school. I had all my friends. I felt like I had a good life, and then we just up and had to move one summer, and it was like my life was over when I was a teenager. I was raped as a teenager from high schoolers. I was too ashamed, like it was my fault.
The next day, he just so coldly threw my belt at me and dropped me off, and God, I remember him just like not even making eye contact with me. Like I just wasn't a person. And I was like, that was how I lost my virginity. And I was like, ugh, kind of just shut off sex as something that I didn't connect this deep trauma to.
I kind of fell off the deep end, and my husband, he would kind of come to me with a lot of money and tell me how he got this money, and that I, kind of that I'd be really good at doing that, the prostituting.
When they said cut on a porn scene, I'm like, all right, done. I don't have to, be your fluffer. Like, this is not my job. Like, you take care of that. And, but when you're alone in a room with somebody, it's like, that was me that was doing it. And I had to disassociate so much. I started drinking more. I started eating less. I was taking Adderall and Xanax and whatever pill I could take.
I had to put on this persona or this, because I had a different name while prostituting. So when I was using that name, I wasn't me. I didn't want to be me.
There's Malia, who's 15 years of me, and then there's Noelle, And so when I would become Malia, it was like I wasn't Noelle. And I didn't feel anything, and I didn't care. It was just totally detachment.
You go into a different world, During the sex acts, I'm disconnected. I didn't look at it like it was my body. I just wanted to get it done and over with.
Drink, smoke, act like somebody I wasn't.
The only people I really could be around were other people that were in porn, that were in that life, and we called everybody else civilians. I remember not really being able to move my body much, but I remember that there were 4 other players in the bedroom. They had their way with me, and then I woke up, and one of them was ironing his white t-shirt next to me and just acted like I wasn't there. What was I gonna do? Say, oh my God, this team, which America loves football, raped this porn star, and America hates porn people, who was gonna believe me that happened? Yeah, so that was when I went, this is my life now. This is what I've signed up for. I had to do sex work to pay for my rehab, and didn't want to address the effects of sex work in the rehab.
I had a woman one time tell me, I don't have a physical trafficker anymore. I have heroin as my trafficker.
I couldn't do those things that I would do with those men unless I was high. And I would just sit in the bathtub, sit in the water, let the water run on me, and clean myself for an hour because I just felt disgusting. And then I would get out and get high because I didn't want to think about it.
As soon as a person that I'm with wants to be sexual, I detach. I'm not there. I'm not there. I don't know how to be there. Yeah, I've been married. It causes major problems within the relationship because I'm just not there, and it makes them feel bad. It makes me feel bad too. I wish I could be there, but I can't. Not yet.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tammy Holland, and most of my time with Zoe is served as a clinical counselor. I see a handful of adult survivors through the Salvation Army program. We work very collaboratively together, and then other survivors that have come to us through other various ways. I do also serve the role as assistant director at this time, and that will be shifting over to 100% clinical fairly soon. My heart is definitely in the clinical realm of counseling. These videos are touching. I'm sure they're touching you like they touch me. It's very amazing to me how God has created and allowed our brain and our body to respond to trauma in a way through dissociation and things like that to survive. So we're going to talk about trauma. That's what I'm here to talk to you about today. The DSM defines trauma as either being actually exposed to or threatened, where you feel that the real threat is there to death, serious injury, or sexual violation. You could be a witness of it. It could directly happen to you. You could learn about it from somebody else that you are very close to and love very, very much. And then you can also have trauma. You take your EMS people, you take your police officers. An overexposure to a trauma could also cause trauma for them. How complex trauma is different from trauma. It's one thing to know about complex trauma. It's an ongoing event. It happens more than once. It's usually planned out. It involves feeling trapped. It really messes with how you form your thoughts about yourself and others. So along with complex trauma, we have shame, trust issues, self-esteem issues, identity issues, inability to regulate themselves issues. It affects you emotionally, physically. It affects your relationships. It's just very pervasive. And one of the biggest things that comes out of this is it's kind of the difference of understanding between guilt and shame. Where guilt would say, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. And when somebody has consistently had interactions that imprints on them that they are bad. Especially children, if they're being physically or sexually or emotionally abused, they have two options to themselves in their mind. One, I have to believe that my caregiver is really bad. Or two, the other option is that it's me. And for a child, they really can't come to a place to say, the person I depend upon for my survival, for all my needs to be met, that person, I can't allow myself to believe that that person is going to be bad, because then I feel like all of what I need is in jeopardy. So it must be me. So they twist themselves up like a pretzel, believing that they're the one that is bad, and then that you can see where that just flows out as they grow up into everything else, how they perceive themselves. I liked this. I put this in there. This is in the Greek, trauma is referred to as a wound. And Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, I put this quote on here, if anyone is interested in trauma, he does a lot of great work. He wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is a phenomenal book that he wrote not that long ago, if you're interested in more on his work. So this is the quote from him. Trauma results in a foundational reorganization of the way mind and brain manage perceptions. It changes not only how we think and what we think about, but also our very capacity to think. And I'll explain that as we talk more about what happens in the brain. Before we get into the details of the brain, kind of want to touch on this phenomenon called trauma bonding. Mark Hogate mentioned it. It's maybe one of those things that don't feel, to the outsider who doesn't understand what's happening in the brain, it doesn't make sense. And there's a lot about trauma that doesn't make sense sometimes. Trauma is very difficult. Dealing with the aftermath of trauma, it's never a linear road, and it's It's a road and it's a path of recovery where you take several steps forward and then you will take some steps back. And that's part of it. Trauma bonding is a lot like Stockholm Syndrome. It's very intense. The time and any small affections that the perpetrator gives towards the victim, it just sends chemicals into the brain that is good, and it is as if the brain really becomes addicted. It's very, just like training a dog, you know, with the brain. It is the not every time. So it's the intermittent. It's I'm not going to reward you for every time you do that. It's going to have to be I might reward you the 5th time you do it. Next time I might reward you the 8th time you do something good. So that keeps the person not knowing. And they just are starving for that, and they want it so bad, like a drug addict wants their fix for their drug of choice. So trauma bonding makes you physiologically, think about that, that's a whole expression, addicted to abuse. This explains why going no contact feels like you're coming off of a drug. That's how powerful it is. We're going to upload a video. You're going to watch it. Before we start it, a little bit about setting this video up. This is a young woman who came out of a program that she was in for quite some time. She's just getting out of the program. You can tell her demeanor. Just notice her countenance. Notice the tone. Notice the words she chooses, and then watch that progress, and you feel like, wow, that did not take long to get undone.
Have my ID. What? You know what? If you want me to come and get it myself, I'm gonna come with Captain of Manhattan Criminal in 10th Precinct, okay? Hello? Because, yo, I'm not gonna go over there and get it myself. That's crazy. Where's the green card? Oh my God. Yo, that's you, yo. You're gonna have to marry me or something. Whatever. You talk some. Yeah, you're supposed to give me like 5, 8 kids, right? You look such a sweet talker. Yeah. Don't worry. We got a lifetime. All right, bye. Love it. I'm such a hypocrite. I say that I don't love like that, but this nigga, he has a way of working me. You know, I'm calling him again. Can't help it. Hello? Daddy. Love you. So I love you.
So there you can clearly see how quickly that the perpetrator was able to come back. He knew what to say. He knew what she wanted to hear. And you can clearly see the trauma bond that she has with her perpetrator. And if you notice her languaging and her tone, she started out very firm in her words, and she quickly, as you could see, almost went to like a childlike state in her, the way she responded and the way she talked to him. And so that woman needs to continue to do work, and yes, she probably is susceptible, at that point for going back, but this is a long journey. Walking out somebody's story like hers, like I said, it's not linear. It's a journey. It's a journey. And at those moments, even if she were to turn and go back for a minute, it is our place to be standing there with arms open, completely ready to love her up when something that was grown in that seed that had been planted when she was under the care for 6 months, that grows and something will spark her if she were to go back, and she might walk out a lot faster next time and want to come back again. And that's our place to be there, ready to receive. Okay, so we're going to get into a little bit about the brain. This is a very basic training on the brain and what trauma does to the brain. So basically, if you think about the brain being having a downstairs, which is your most primal, it develops first as you're born and you develop. That's your basic level functioning going on at your downstairs brain. And then as you grow and develop, your upstairs brain develops, and that is all your higher level of thinking. Upstairs brain is your decision making, your moral reasoning, your ability to make a plan, a logistical plan, right? So it's higher functioning. Downstairs brain is just your basic your downstairs brain is there to keep you alive, pretty much. Okay, so what trauma does, as we talk about upstairs, downstairs brain, is when a child is abused, it reorganizes. The fight, flight, freeze is in the downstairs brain, and the brain starts to reorganize around fight, flight, freeze. So the downstairs brain becomes more developed at the cost to the upstairs brain than becoming underdeveloped, because it gets stuck in the fight, flight, freeze a lot. Okay. What we also have, we have a right brain, left brain. I'm sure y'all know that. The left side of your brain, the left side of a brain of somebody who's been traumatized is more developed and used than the right side. And the right side is all where your kind of creativity parts are. And that's why it's just, if you hear about art therapy, even movement, like with music, yoga, dancing, theater, any of those kinds of things are just phenomenal for trauma survivors, because that part of the brain is underdeveloped. Also, what also comes with the right side of the brain, the upstairs right side of the brain, are the emotions. The ability to kind of self-regulate is coming out of the right side. So that gives even more understanding is why, especially kiddos that have had trauma, have a really hard time regulating themselves, okay? Because that's all underdeveloped. Okay, the corpus callosum is what connects right brain and left brain. For somebody with a lot of trauma, this is going to be smaller than it typically should be, a normal brain size. And how this looks is, the example I like to give is, say you have like a 10-year-old boy and he's throwing a ball against the wall in the house. And mom or foster mom or whoever says, "Buddy, if you want to throw the ball, take the ball outside, please, but not in the living room." And he keeps going. And to an outsider who wouldn't understand trauma, they would see that child as being willfully defiant. And the response to a willfully defiant child might sound like, I know you heard me, and you're not listening, and so therefore give me your ball. Maybe something like that. But a person that understands this child's brain is different, he knows that the corpus callosum is smaller, therefore it's going to take longer for that child to interpret and process what was said. And so it comes across as a delay. And when you know it's a delay, you wait for them to get the message and let them respond properly. Okay, next we're going to talk about the thalamus. The thalamus, think of the thalamus as your very first point of entry. So the thalamus, all the information that we're taking into our body with our 5 senses is going straight to the thalamus. With the exception of smell, smell goes directly to the amygdala. So the thalamus's job is to say, oh, I smell smoke. Is there fire? I feel something touching me. Am I in danger? Like, right, it's constantly surveying, taking in all the information. It goes to the thalamus. That's the thalamus's job. The thalamus, well, let me just tell you about the amygdala. The amygdala is the sounding alarm. It's the smoke detector. It's the watchdog. It's the one that decides whether or not we're gonna turn the alarm on and respond right out of this state of being alarmed. It detects. Its job is to detect if there's a threat or do I need to be fearful here? Is there a real threat or not? It also stores implicit memory. So that's really important to know. So it is the amygdala. Let's say, for example, you have a child and they are really overly reacting. They're having almost a panic attack when you're about to take them and they're about to get in the water at a pool. And they do not even know why they're reacting this way. They have no memory of something bad happening to them involving water, but their body is full on in being triggered and is having a response. That is because that memory was stored in the amygdala, so they can't pull it out of explicit memory, but the body remembers. And if something bad happened with water in their past, that's why it's the amygdala that's holding that memory. The amygdala is also the commander of fight, flight, freeze, of getting that into motion. The other piece that I want you to know, and then we'll connect them all, is the hippocampus. So its job is to store explicit memories. So I want you to think of the hippocampus as like your photo album, and all of your memories, it stamps them. It like time stamps them, and it stamps them for where and how long you were there, along with that memory and the emotions. So it captures that moment. It's like a panoramic view, and it puts that memory as if in a photo album for you. Okay? It encodes the emotional information along with that memory as well. So here's what happens for all of us. Our thalamus intakes the information, goes to the amygdala. The amygdala checks in with the hippocampus super fast. Hey, we have any bad memory about that? Yes or no? If it's a yes, we go into fight, flight, freeze. If it's a no, we don't go into fight, flight, freeze. Okay, so that's kind of the way it works. Okay, the hippocampus with trauma, however, what we know is that the brain floods with cortisol. okay? If there's a fear, if we have a fear, the brain floods with cortisol, which makes the hippocampus not work as effectively as it's created to work. So the pictures that it takes are fragmented, they're fuzzy, the cortisol affects it all, and it starts to make, it just becomes very vague. That with the information that it stores. So it's not overly reliable anymore. When something's happening when your brain flooded with cortisol, it affects the way the hippocampus does its job. It also does not put a timestamp on it. I think I said it takes fragmented pictures. It overgeneralizes. And these overgeneralizations create for false information for later. The amygdala, remember that's the sound alarm, the smoke alarm, starts to become way overactivated. The amygdala, because the hippocampus has faulty information, so let's say, for example, somebody had a really bad experience with a belt, okay? A physical experience with a belt. Anything at all that could even closely resemble a belt, hippocampus is, because it's got faulty information now, because it processed that and it stored it under a lot of cortisol, it's going to say anything that looks like a belt. It's going to sound the alarm. So you think about noises, think about all of the overgeneralizations that now the person who experienced that trauma has a whole slew of things that the brain's going to say, oh, that reminds me of that. That could be that. Oh, did you hear that noise? That kind of resembles that noise we heard when that really bad thing happened. And the amygdala is working hard, and what that creates is a person who's hypervigilant all the time. Because the amygdala is getting false information from the hippocampus. And that's why. Another thing that's really important to know is that as soon as you go into downstairs brain and your fight, flight, freeze kicks in, your upstairs brain goes offline. So in essence, it's pretty clear-cut to say you're either really operating out of upstairs brain or downstairs brain. And so for PTSD, what happens for people is the thalamus takes in the information. It's a very, very, very short and straight line to the amygdala, the information. The information goes two ways from our thalamus. It goes up to the front cortex, and it goes down directly to the amygdala. It always hits the amygdala before it has time to get up here. So with PTSD, you'll have people say, I don't trust myself because, say, a loud noise happens, and before they even know it, they're on the ground taking cover. And their body responded like that. And that is because the message got to the downstairs brain first, because it always does, and it didn't get up here yet to make reason of it. Well, I'm at whatever will give a loud noise. I'm out in the parking lot, and there's a lot of cars coming in and slamming of doors or something. Something that the brain would go, I can reason that. I can tell you why that probably you just heard that loud noise. But because it gets to the downstairs brain first, upstairs brain goes offline, and now they're on the floor before they even realize it, because they're not using their prefrontal cortex. Your brain just told you your life is on the line, because I remember last time we kind of heard a loud noise like that, you almost lost your life, so I'm going to force you to, we're going to go to fight, flight, freeze to save your life. But in truth, it's not a life-threatening situation. So that's the issue with PTSD, that's a struggle with people with PTSD. They feel like they can't trust themselves because their body's just responding. I guess I talked too much. The thing just went off. Okay, we'll go from here. Okay, so what does it look like? I told you about easily triggered, right? Because we've got so many generalizations that now can trigger from the brain. So they're hypervigilant. Pauses after question or response or request, because the corpus callosum, it's going to take more time for that person to process. So if you're dealing with anybody with a lot of trauma, if you can, you give them a moment to think about it. Like you throw that in as part of the natural conversation. Let me give you a moment just to think about that. Struggles with emotions and sensory, remember that's right brain and upstairs right brain. So that's very underdeveloped. So understanding that their sensory and their self-regulated ability to self-regulate, they're going to struggle with that. Creativity, as I said before, the right brain is underdeveloped. So coming in and helping develop this creative side to them is just so healing. And they look for ways to have their own control because trauma is really, for most of them, they did not have the choice to escape or to not struggle and suffer under it. And so they want control. They want control of their personhood. A lot of them might want to be by a door. They want to make sure I have an exit out. They want to, whatever an activity is or something, they might want it to look a certain way that would make them feel somewhat more safe. Like, for example, where their back is not to a lot of other things going on, they would probably want the control to say, I need to see. I don't want anyone coming up behind me. I don't want anything going on that I don't feel like I'm in control of. So how to respond? For one of the best things you can do is you can just be very in tune and attuned to a person that you know has struggled with a lot of trauma, because you should be able to, if you're really paying attention, notice if they just all of a sudden went and kind of really became alarmed about something, so that you can come alongside of them, offer them encouraging where it's like, you know what, that was just a car door. You're okay. That was a car door. Lead deep breathing exercises. I used to, I'm not gonna lie, I used to think that sounded kind of cliche. Just take some deep breaths, you'll be okay. And then I really learned the science behind it and really, truly know and believe how wonderful it is for a calming down skill, because we all have what's called the vagus nerve, and it's the longest running nerve in your body. And basically, almost all of your internal organs are connected to the vagus nerve. And so we use it as a command center. And when we do slow, deep breathing, it's really the exhale where we get the control, the message going down. And it's a very slow, audible exhale. So you always inhale through your nose, and you hold it. And then you exhale out your mouth very slowly and very controlled, in a very controlled way. And that sends the message through by the vagus nerve for the whole inside of your body to calm down. And it really works. Check in with their body, notice and release any tension in the body. Trauma, people with a lot of trauma, they have a lot of times where their mind and body are kind of disconnected. So encouraging them to check in with their body, notice, hey, are you carrying any tension right now? If so, let's, loosen up and let's release it. And just helping them recognize if they're carrying it actually in their body. Offer choices, again, this goes along with their control. Using grounding skills. If you know someone is either approaching a panic attack, could be in a panic attack, high anxiety, any of those things, we use the senses as a means to ground them. So you can say, tell me, 3 things you see right now. Tell me 2 things you hear right now. One of my favorite ways to do it is I like to say, can you look around and find 5 circles right now? Because it gives the brain a little bit more task, a higher level of task. But what that does is if we're using our 5 senses, our brain cannot be going down these roads of what if, of whatever the panic or the anxiety is related to. So if I'm really just standing here thinking about, wow, where are 5 circles? Oh, okay, I see circles up there. I can't be thinking about both at the same time. So it kind of forces that person to become present. That's what that does. Additional thoughts. Positive interactions rewire the brain, and I'm going to link that to offer redos. Really, really, really important. If somebody has a behavior and did something that we want to correct that's not appropriate, we let them know, buddy, that's not appropriate. And then we give them a chance. If they don't know what is appropriate, of course, we teach them. But we give them the opportunity for a redo. Okay, let's go back and let's redo that. How about you ask me again using, your good words? And the brain rewires. So having that positive experience, like I did it right, begins to rewire the brain. So you don't want to just end the conversation with, you know what, we don't cuss here. So, next time or whatever, you want literally in the moment to say, let's do it again and let's do it right, and allow a redo. Practice regulating yourself, drinking water. We lose up to 10% of our cognition ability anyway, just being thirsty, not having enough water. So that's a simple one that you can watch. Matching behavior to the child, that's just really being attuned, and being as playful as you can is very helpful. And offer compromises. Compromises allow space for them to have a voice also, where it sends a message like, I do hear you. Sometimes the answer is no, but maybe we can work out a compromise. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I hope that you found some things that are helpful to realize. And I know that, a lot of us, we all know people who have experienced and survived trauma. So hopefully that will give you some more understanding. Thank you.
Walking on a reservation, back roads, dirt roads, all hours of the night. If I were to fall asleep somewhere, that would scare me.
What I did, I had this grandiose idea that if I sold my body enough, I could save some money. And I chased that illusion. I wasn't more worried about what I had to do to get there. I just wanted the goal. And the goal was to get the money so I can get the apartment, so I can get my son back.
Men I met that would say I could stay with them, but there was no sleeping. Sex was always on the top of their minds. It was never free, nothing. It was just tiresome all the time, nowhere to go.
I needed a place to stay anyway because I was on the street. It was him and his 2 sons, and they all had weapons, so we couldn't leave, we couldn't go anywhere. From there, he just took us on the track.
I never saved a penny. It wasn't because I didn't work hard. It wasn't because I didn't go to work every day. I went to jail a lot. I got 3 years parole, and it lasted for 8 years. Because every time I got out, I needed an apartment, right? So I tried to do it again. I'd go back. And every time I got out, I needed an apartment again. And it just was this revolving friggin' door.
I didn't know how to work. I had a criminal history already. I really couldn't function from day to day like how some people do. I had a lot of depression. And so I was still turning dates. It's hard to function in this world that doesn't understand me. This housing program wants me to do this chore like once a month, like let's say it's vacuuming the hallway, which is not, you think it's not a big deal, but there's men in the building. I can't explain why some days I can't get up. I can't move. I can't be happy. All I could do is just cry.
It is absolutely critical for a woman who's being trafficked to be able to access some place where she can exit the trauma. When she's always looking behind her, when she's always worried about further trauma, she can never come back to zero. She can never feel that moment of safety that allows her to recalibrate, that allows her to say, okay, this is peace, this is safety. I can think about finding an exit.
I actually didn't fill out my first apartment application till I was 30. I remember going to get the key and they gave me a keychain and they were like, here. And they were like, you know, you understand you can go in there anytime you want, right? It was like so weird. I think I ran around the house and just like kissed the floor and kind of like went out the door and in the door a couple of times, like just listening to the key lock, you know? I had one plate and one cup because that's all I could afford, and a plant.
Getting to the other side requires such a leap of faith. You have to have in your mind some concept of what that other side is gonna look like.
Honestly, that was the first time I had stability, ever. Ever. And the housing provided that. Because I didn't have to do anything or say anything right or do anything right or be nice to anyone to turn the key.
Would you mind talking a little bit about the rehabilitation process?
First part of it is really getting them into a place where they're safe, where they can feel comfortable talking about what happened to them. The one thing about sexual exploitation is if there's so much shame associated with it, especially if somebody is not familiar with it. So when you're in a place where all the staff understand it and other girls that are there have been through it themselves, it provides an environment where the girls are more likely and have freedom to share and open up about what their own personal experiences are. They're in a safe place, they can get back in school, they can begin to see and learn what's happened to them, and again through their counseling they can begin to stabilize until they get into the next step after our care.
Just to quickly kind of recap the things that we've talked about today, some of the most important things are, one, this rehabilitation process that we just discussed for the survivors, and then the other is the solution of accreditation companies stepping in and sort of mandating the human trafficking response protocol. How long do you think it will take to see these two things be widespread and national?
I'd be thrilled to see it in the next 10 years, frankly. I've been involved in the anti-trafficking movement for 15 years now, and I've seen some progress. I've not nearly seen what I would have hoped in 15 years. I do see that state governments now have laws against trafficking, especially child sex trafficking. Still, some states need to pass what we call safe harbor laws that provide special care for the minors. The whole healthcare industry is really being slow and taking on their responsibility in identifying and helping these victims. Unfortunately, I do think that eventually they will, because most people in healthcare do care about helping people. That's why they got into it, but they just haven't seen this as a priority like they should. But if in 10 years every hospital in this country had a good, solid, complete response protocol in place to identify and assist victims of trafficking, I would be thrilled. And then that would help them get other organizations or agencies that need to come alongside and help these victims, get them up and running, get communities aware of the need, and begin to serve these survivors.
I was just walked into it, I guess. The dancing, just, hey, all you have to do is go in there and take your clothes off. And I was there 2 weeks working before I met my pimp and left with him, blackout drunk.
One day he asked me if I wanted to go to Hollywood. And I mean, what young girl doesn't want to go to Hollywood, right? I felt like really good about that. I felt like, wow, he wants me to go with him. Like, he must really care about me. He must really love me, like he says.
I come from a small reservation community. I never had access to like the latest designer clothes or jewelry or nice restaurants or anything like that. So he would take me out and buy me clothes, take me out to eat, really try to be like the knight in shining armor. And unbeknownst to me, what I found out later is he was a third generation pimp.
We found some guy on Craigslist that said he was doing swimsuit modeling. We went the first time, just did the swimsuits, and then he told us about, you can make more money if you take your top off, if you take your bottom off.
For a few years, I started answering phones. So I was the one that you would call the escort service, legal in Las Vegas, and set up dates for each lady. And building friendships with each one, hearing their stories. I seen what was more like a movie rather than reality.
I understood there would be adult film activity. I mean, it was adult. It was being an adult film model, and I thought, all right, I'll just do this, and then I'll go back home and graduate, and nothing will come of it. That turned out a very big company that just put not my face, but another part of me on their front of their website, like the day after I graduated high school. So
I started asking the girls, let me go on these calls with you when I get off. And I eventually just talked my way into going on some of these calls, and it was like seeing the backside of the movie I was watching. Everybody's involved, from the bellhops to the security, the front desk, because there's money to be made in the full circle.
after a while, I wasn't getting as much work. That was when I learned about privates, where people really wanted porn stars to come and have sex with them. And so it was like a private escorting company. And I remember at the beginning thinking, I would never do that.
Everything was fine for a short time period, and then all of a sudden it comes with, we don't have the money to pay the rent. I promise nobody's going to touch you. If you go and you dance for these guys this one night, I won't ask you to do it again. You can make all this money. We'll be able to have the rent. But in all actuality, if you allow yourself to step out of your ethics, it's really difficult to get back. I made a lot of money dancing. Nobody touched me, but it was all part of the grooming process. It was to get me to expand my values and to be able to step over that threshold into being exploited?
I realized what I got into and that it was not, didn't feel good. So I kind of just was like, well, I had a good way of just saying, you signed up for this, like just ride on through, like put your game face on. You are here and you have no way of getting back. I didn't have any boundaries. I had started to become the identity that was the person in front of the camera. Like, I became this like sexy 18-year-old that was getting paid to, have sex and get flown places and have her hair and makeup done and be told she's beautiful and,
How did your life evolve from there?
Sorry. It just got pretty ugly.
I was taught that my body is it's a vessel. It's something that you hold close to yourself. It's like the most precious thing that you can have, or that a woman can have, is herself. And my husband just had me giving it away.
I don't know why I'm different. What made me not be like all my other friends who had the same experiences and came home and ended up getting married and having careers. I'm not dumb, but I was so desperate for somebody to want to be around me and want to be with me.
Hi, my name is Diana Suchodolski, and I'm a project coordinator for the Human Trafficking Interagency Coordinating Council, and also a volunteer advocate for Meet Me at the Well. This afternoon, I'm hoping to empower you to recognize signs of human trafficking through red flags, and also empower you to speak up and report it. Thanks to the film industry, many of us have a distorted image of what trafficking looks like. It looks like, on one side, a glorious way to be saved, or that if you're not kidnapped into it, it's not trafficking. Both of those messages are dangerous because they create false images of what trafficking really is. When a victim sees these messages, to them, they don't think that what they're experiencing is trafficking. And that's harmful because then they're less likely to seek help. So the films that are on the left are documentaries. We should listen to survivors, listen to experiences of lived experiences. To get an idea of how and where we may see trafficking, we need to understand how big this problem is. This trafficking spans across 25 industries in this image, but that number, almost 17,000 cases in the United States, is just a fraction of what's actually happening in this billion-dollar industry across the globe. The reality of trafficking looks like this. Thanks to the work of Yolanda Slabaugh and Zoe Ministries, legislature is taking notice, and work is happening and change is happening to bring attention to what trafficking looks like in our communities. In one of these, it's the illicit massage establishments. So if you see an illicit massage establishment where the price of the massage is $60 or lower, that's a huge red flag. A professional clinical massage therapist would start their prices at $60, $70, $75 an hour. Another red flag is that there are security at the front door. in some outreach work that we did in New York, we weren't even allowed to enter. The door was locked, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and because we were women, they wouldn't let us in, even though the sign for the establishment said that it was open. These are just some of the recruitment tactics of traffickers, and the reason why this is important is because it helps us to ask questions to look below the surface. So, intimate partner and marriage propositions are the most common use for recruiting for sex trafficking, and then it's also used later, as was mentioned by Tammy Holland, as leverage to control the person to keep them in a relationship. In labor trafficking, the job offer is the biggest recruitment tactic. As we heard in the life stories, it's a promise of a modeling job, an acting contract, or domestic worker. There's a lot going on this slide. These are the situational red flags. But what I want us to think about is that the first 3 bullet points sound very much like domestic violence. They sound very much like intimate partner violence. And it is a red flag for domestic violence, but it's also a trigger to go deeper, to ask more about what's going on beneath the surface. So if we look at scared or unable to leave the situation, check. Disclose that someone is pressuring them into doing sexual favors, or being transported to and from work by a guard or a boyfriend. And then we look below and we see that the person has a pimp or a manager, or they work in an industry that is culturally known for being more accepting of sex acts, such as in the adult entertainment industry, like a strip club. But if you combine some of the ones on the bottom, the bottom 3, having a pimp or being pressured into doing sexual favors, then we can start to dig deeper and see this as a sign of trafficking. Some of the emotional red flags are depression, disorientation or confusion, and the one that I've seen the most when I'm working with women and men survivors of trafficking is that they're afraid to answer questions without getting permission. That's probably the most heartbreaking to see emotionally. And in Tammy's presentation, the video of an escalated person was powerful, because something that would not upset us if someone called and said, we're going to be 10 minutes late. If you don't have PTSD, it's something you can just deal with. But somebody who has been the victim of extreme trauma, that could send them into a spiral of emotions. And our third grouping of red flags are the physical red flags. And these would be more appropriate for foster parents or someone in a clinical setting. So they would be persistent or untreated STIs or UTIs, abnormally high number of sex partners, frequent trauma to the groin, rectum, jaw, or neck, repeated abortions or miscarriages, gang tags, or inventory-style tattoos.
When you work in the service industry,
this is a video for field workers.
In all sorts of areas. Meet a lot of people, and even pets. Out here, you have to take your job seriously. And always be on the lookout to find better ways to safeguard the people you serve.
What kind of shop are you guys going here?
Tool and die shop.
Great, welcome to the neighborhood.
Thanks.
Or the products that protect their homes. Or services to get their homes running just right. you work hard every day because you don't want to miss a thing.
Like you just did.
Do I have your attention?
Workers who are in people's homes on a day-to-day basis are a critical part of identifying potential cases of human trafficking and combating this horrific crime. When you know what to look for, you can help bring an end to human trafficking.
As service workers, you play an important role in the detection of human trafficking. You are on the front lines, in homes and in neighborhoods. Now that you know some of the signs to look for, you can help save those who are being victimized. Together, we can make a difference. If you identify someone you think may need help, please contact the National Human Trafficking Resource Center at 888-373-7888. This is a toll-free hotline that's available to answer calls from anywhere in the country, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and all calls are confidential. On behalf of the Michigan State Police, thank you for your help in keeping our community safe.
I just want to give a quick thank you to Michigan State Police for putting that together. It's an amazing video, and it's only 2.5 minutes, so please share that. And thank you to the service workers out there. You are our eyes and ears. And it just goes to show you that everyone plays a role in being able to recognize human trafficking. What to do if you suspect that someone you know or someone that you don't know is a victim of human trafficking. First, as Officer Mark Holgate mentioned, we definitely don't want to approach someone because it could put them in a dangerous position if their trafficker suspects that they may have given information. You absolutely want to report it, and we'll share that information again at the end. But if you do know someone and you are close to them and you recognize that they are in a situation of exploitation, they might not have the language to identify that. So with compassion and patience, if you are able to have a conversation, take baby steps and be patient. Another reason why they may not self-identify is that they are conditioned by the trafficker not to trust law enforcement or state providers. Or there may be a third party that is sent with them whenever they're around, so they might not want to talk about it. They may not disclose their trafficker because, as we learned, the trafficker in their mind might be their boyfriend or a loved one to them that's providing them with shelter and food. And if you are in a position to have the conversation, always establish a sense of safety. And of course, if you do recognize trafficking, you want to report it to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. When you start there, the information is disseminated to local law enforcement. But in addition to calling the National Human Trafficking Hotline, you want to call 911. And because Delaware is a mandatory reporting state, if a minor is involved, you are absolutely mandated to call the Delaware Department of Services for Children, Youth, and their families for their 24-hour hotline. And I just wanted to say thank you so much. And we all have a role to play.
Hello, I'm Heather, and I'm a survivor of sexual exploitation. And I'm here to share some of my experience and mostly my hope. And I've been out of that life since June 1st, 2017. And, you know, when I accepted help, I didn't know that I had experienced exploitation. I just knew that I was suicidal. I knew that I was afraid. I knew that I did not recognize the woman in the mirror. And I knew that I could not stop drinking and using drugs. I believed that I had dug a hole so deep that there was no way I could ever be a part of the world again. In the kind of pit of despair, I had reached out to my sister. She had 8 years clean in a 12-step program at the time here in Delaware. And I told her about this much of what was going on with me, and I think she could kind of guess some of the rest. And she told me to pack a book bag and come here. And I said, you don't understand, I can't. And she told me not to be afraid and that everything was gonna be okay. When I left, I didn't feel relieved. I felt terrified. As I started getting more help, as I started receiving counseling, it became clear to me and everyone around me that there was something else going on, because I really, really, really wanted to go back. And even though I knew that that made no sense and that it was a horrible place, all I wanted to do was go back. And it got to the point where it drove me nuts, and I felt like I couldn't look anyone in the eye. I felt like they knew. I couldn't hold down a job. I had a mentor who was friends with a woman who, she worked for a ministry, and they dealt with women coming out of exploitation, and there was some small literature on it. And I started reading that, and I started hearing a vocabulary I'd never heard before. And there were women sharing their stories, and they were using words like coercion and fraud and force and manipulation and boundaries and all these things that I just had never heard of before. And it made sense to me. And I started looking back in my history and realizing, you know, I was promised things that didn't come true. I was told I was going places that I wasn't. And I started getting freedom from all the confusion in my head. And honestly, you know, I started forming a relationship with God. And so today I have a truth. And when I build off of that truth, and when I make decisions off of that truth, my life looks completely different. And that is a miracle. You know, today I'm halfway through grad school. I'm getting my master's in clinical mental health counseling. I'm part of my church community. I'm available for my family. I'm in a relationship today that I have boundaries. I'm with someone who's gentle and communicates with me. And I didn't know something like that existed. I mean, what I thought was love was not love. What I thought was loyalty was not loyalty. What I thought was family was not family. And I always felt deep down like this can't be what life is supposed to be like. We're not meant to feel trapped and to feel worthless and to feel like an alien in this world. I just want people to know that we're all capable of so much more, and we're meant for so much more. So I'm just honored and just so very humbled to be able to speak into this issue, and maybe just so that someone can see that it's easy to judge someone out there. But I just want to say that, you know, I'm proof that, you know, with the right support, we can be free from all that.
It's called branding. Pimps will put a number or a name or a symbol on their hoes. It's a form of identification. She's with me.
I got to a point where it was like, if one more man touches me, I'm gonna kill him.
My worldview completely changed. I kind of started to see every date as rape. I looked down on the tricks a lot more and started to hate them and blame them for what was happening, because if they didn't want to pay for sex, my pimp wouldn't be selling me for sex.
I had a criminal record. I had no credit. I was not able to get an apartment. I wasn't able to get a job. I identified myself as a prostitute.
There's all these people who have jobs and go jogging and, you know, do stuff like that, you know, and it was like, I didn't know how to do any of that. I was in this subculture. And the subculture is so different than the square world, you know? I mean, I just never thought that I would be normal. I never thought that I would be out of the life. Never.
My husband, he was also working with another female, and we dropped her off, took her to a date, and it was the police. And I just climbed out of my car and I sat there and I waited for the police to come. I was not trying to run. I didn't. I had, earlier that day, I told him I want nothing to do with this. I'm done. I want my son. I want my life back. I don't want this anymore.
They were able to remove me from the situation. I would love to tell you that that was the end of my exploitation, the end of my plight, the end of everything. But unfortunately, at that time period, there wasn't systems in place to give me the follow-up care and the services that I needed.
I was so tired of them touching me and just, you know, I was just so tired. And so I made a plan and I started saving money.
I started talking to my family counselor, who is my pastor.
I decided to call a bunch of domestic violence shelters and I made a police report just to get in somewhere safe where we can be away from this perp.
I put enough money away, and one day I went and did my last day in the strip club and came home and I just said I'm not going back. And I never went back. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, because then I had to learn how to get a job.
I just stood in being broke. I stood in having to rebuild. I stood and have to wait in line for assistance. I humbled myself to get food boxes. I did what I had to do to rebuild.
Hated it. I absolutely hated it, but I really needed it.
I often got triggered to go back into the life. There was a point that I had been out 10 years and all hell had broke loose with my family dynamic, and I'm like, I know what I can do real quick.
But I had the faith that somehow this was going to work out. And I got a job. My first job ever was working in a restaurant as a server. I got sober. I quit drinking when I was 30 years old. And I went back to school and I got a bachelor's degree. If you just try something different, like just try it, your self-esteem starts growing.
It's no longer a scar to me. It's my warrior Band-Aid. It lets me know where I've been and where I'm going.
Well, I want to first start off with why this is a necessary work. Simply put,
across the country, there is a great shortage of beds for minor trafficked victims. There is just simply not enough places to go and experience God's healing like Zoe is trying to open. You know, oftentimes these young girls need a higher level of care than a foster home or a family unit can offer them. And so this is why it's so important for specialized homes like the ones Zoe is offering. And if you think about all the services we offer to victims in our culture, maybe a victim of sexual assault or rape, maybe a victim of domestic violence or childhood abuse or addiction recovery. And trafficking takes all of those and really they're compiled into like a big snowball. That's the issue that we're dealing with. And so it is a necessary work. And it's also one that I believe has proven to be successful. I think there's really two reasons why we've seen them be successful. The first reason is because trauma is a breaking of a community. It's a breaking of a relationship. And oftentimes these young girls have experienced that trauma within their family unit, starting within their family unit. And so I think there is a special kind of healing that can happen within a family-like environment, that you have a home, a community of people where these young girls can step into and heal the breaking that has happened within their community. I think another reason why we see these homes have great success is because they have the opportunity to provide a highly intensified trauma treatment. It's a highly intensified treatment that these young girls would not be able to receive otherwise, where they can mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually participate on a healing journey in a shorter amount of time in a very intense way. And I think that is another reason why we see this be so successful for these young girls. We have seen young girls come who are 4 or 5 years behind school, but they're able to graduate within our homes. We've seen girls who are 14 and 15 years old who need resources and their families need healing. And through participating in the services that are able to be offered, they're able to then go back into their family with more resources and healing that they wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And we have seen young girls come, turn 18, and be able to go really into young adulthood with many more resources and stability than they would have been able to. And that's why I believe this is a successful model for these young girls to participate in. And lastly, why care? There are so many things, and you know, in your church, there are so many things to participate in. When I look at our time, I see the commercialization and sexualization and selling of young girls as one of the main issues of our time. And I think we will see how the church has risen up and responded to meet this issue. I've been going through the book of Isaiah for the last 9 or 10 months, really. And it's in that book, in the beginning, where God is really warning his people, look, this is what's going to happen, and this is why. And he tells them, as he pleads with them in the beginning of the book, to turn from their ways and choose different choices. He says in chapter 1, verse 16, he says, cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice and correct oppression. And I think, wow, what words to heed as Zoe is partnering with the church there. Cease to do evil. This is what Zoe is working to do, to really correct the oppression that we have seen of these young girls. Now, oftentimes We think of trafficking as an issue that is over there. Maybe it's the girl in the city or the girl in a different country overseas. But what we know now, after really doing 20 years of this work, is that trafficking is actually a local issue. In the state of Ohio, I have worked and partnered with over 200 survivors. And most of those survivors, the large majority, they grew up in Northeast Ohio. And they were being sold by people from Northeast Ohio and being bought from those same people in that same area. And that is true for you too. This is an issue that whatever schools surround the church that you are leading, whatever schools are there, that those school children are the ones that are being affected by these issues. Your children are going to school or playing sports with or participating in theater with children who are being sold for sex. Sex buyers are the ones that you pass in the grocery store or are sitting in your pews. And the ones that are selling people also have probably been raised within our communities. This is a local issue. I think that God has called the local church to be a city on the hill, to be a light and a beacon of hope for those who are around us. And I think God has placed your church in this particular place and particular time to partner with those who are correcting oppression and bringing justice. And that's exactly what Zoe is seeking to do. So thank you for being here today. I'm excited to hear how the local body has risen up and partnered with what Zoe is doing. I'm excited to see this house open and to hear the stories of reconciliation and healing that has happened in these young girls' lives. And I look forward to hearing about how you have really partnered with God as He builds up what has been formerly devastated.
Hi, I'm Steve Himmelfarb, and I'm trustee of the Matt Haley Trust. I want to share for a minute why the Matt Haley Trust invests in Zoe Ministries. It really starts with the Matt Haley part of the Matt Haley Trust. Matt Haley, as many of you know, was a lot of things, including a successful restaurateur, a James Beard award-winning chef, a global entrepreneur, and also somebody who was sexually abused as a child, a former addict, and somebody who spent years in prison. Matt Haley, in many ways, was the ultimate redemption story. That story of redemption is based on caring. The story of redemption is based on investment. And that's exactly what Zoe is all about. Matt Haley said, everything that happened in my life happened for me, not to me. It was the turnaround of perspective that enabled Matt to build upon instead of being defined by all of the negative circumstances in his life. Zoe is the entity. Zoe is the people that invest in the most vulnerable. Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor and author, said, "The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference." I ask that you join me and the Matt Haley Trust to no longer be indifferent towards the cause of human trafficking, to look it in the eye and say, we're going to do something about it, and do it through Zoe Ministries. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us today, for being a part of the awareness and the mission that we are all seeking. If anything that you have watched today has resonated within you, please feel free to go to zoe-delaware.org to find more information, and anything you can do to help this situation would be beyond appreciated. Thank you so much.